Welcome to Spleensplaining, a human design podcast by Leslie.
Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Leslie again. I wanted to do a follow-up video to my episode last time about the subconscious, the inner child, and deconditioning in human design through the body. If you're talking about the inner child, we also kind of need to talk about what it is to be an adult. And I can really only speak to my cultural setting here in the United States. I see, and this was certainly true for me, we lack rites of passage. We lack real initiations into adulthood that have good context and good guidance and grounding and preparation for what it truly means to be an adult. We really grow up lacking that wisdom and a connection to other generations where you do have elders and you do have guidance is really sorely missing in the way that most of us are raised in this country. So most of us are sort of tossed into adulthood and we become more and more not self. We become so deeply conditioned because rather than being grounded, embodied, fully fledged human beings who are allowed space to mature, given guidance through this process and have a better understanding of what is exactly happening, we are more tossed into these adult situations at younger and younger ages. At least that's what I'm seeing. We're tossed into these adult situations and we are just sink or swim. We have to just merely survive. Our open centers are those deepest places of insecurity and they are the most open to conditioning. So you can see how this becomes a recipe for the not self. Rather than that grounded adult, we have more of a mishmash of coping mechanisms and adapted strategies that are rooted in survival fears and just trying to survive life instead of really respond from our center. Our not self really manages this process. It is very defensive, it's very reactive, it is just trying to protect and preserve our ego, protect those insecurities, accepting that program deeply into itself and going from there. If all of this really stems through our deepest insecurities, then what's compelling us and what is driving our behavior is a lot of shame. Ra Uru Hu has described the deconditioning process over and over again as discovering the beauty of what it is to be us. So that is not those shame filters. We need to clear away that shame that distorts us and so unfairly judges us for the behaviors and the actions and the thoughts and all that we've done in a survival mode, in reaction to life. So what we know about the arousal of the sympathetic nervous system, fight, flight, freeze, it's different than parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. In fight, flight, freeze, we are super activated. We are very aroused in our nervous system. We're alert. We have some fear and some adrenaline coursing through us. In that state, we know we have a lot less access to a variety of thoughts, perspectives, and really options and ways to respond. It limits us. It narrows our vision. It narrows our choices in response to what we are seeing in our life context. So we know it limits us. This state of hyperarousal, while it is an evolutionary need, we need to be able to have a legitimate fear of threat and danger and be able to respond to that appropriately in order to survive. However, in this very mind-oriented, not self world, we have so many messages of threat and fear and survival responses that are coming at us constantly. This program is so saturated in all of these messages and perceived threats that put us in that state of hyperarousal. So we are saturated in sympathetic response, in a state of nervous activity that limits us. It condenses things down and we are just focused on survival. So that harsh inner critic, that voice that just judges the crap out of us no matter what we do inside, we also are conditioned with that voice and it so unfairly judges us for the things we had to do, the thoughts that we had, the choices that we had available to us in that sympathetic state. And that's been so many of our lives driven by that state. And so we can see how this layer of shame and this layer of judgment and this layer of unworthiness is just added suffering piled on top of what we're already suffering in this life. It's super unfair, it's not necessary, and we can forgive ourselves for everything we needed to do in order to just survive. Or if we perceived or felt deeply that we were in a real life-threatening scenario, whether it was or not, this is where we're kept. This is the level that people operate from so often in this program. It is super unfair to judge ourselves based on that. It is so largely outside of our control, and any human being is going to respond that way, respond in a limited state, because it is simply brain chemistry. It is our physiology. There is no way to really get around that fact. It's not our fault that keeping people in survival mode is really useful for the program, and so that's where we've been at, that's where we've responded from, and we can absolutely forgive ourselves for anything we've done or thought or reactions that we have or whatever it is that we're unfairly judging ourselves for when in that state. So this is where connecting with our inner child, it is so helpful in this process because it is reconnecting with our innocence and our inherent goodness. We come into this world without shame, without this conditioning to get us to be reactive and defensive and to work to cover those insecurities and all of that stuff. When we're children, we are much more natural, and it's only as life starts to happen to us and we learn these different responses that will pile on shame on top of ourselves, we'll view ourselves negatively, we will view ourselves as unlovable, inherently unworthy, and all of these things based on these stories that we create for context for what's happening to us, for an explanation of why we experience neglect, for example, why we experience over-the-top punitive responses to our behavior, all of those things that give us the message that we're bad, we internalize it, and it just keeps piling up. And this is really the core of the not self. This is really the core, the deep core of conditioning. And deconditioning brings us back to our innocence, to our purity, to our inherent worthiness and value that we all absolutely have. We're born with, it's our birthright. So it brings us back to that, connecting to that preconditioning state of who we are and the preciousness of what that is. It's the key to our authenticity. We are no longer as compelled by shame because we're not lacking anything. There's nothing to prove. Like Ross said again, the beauty of what it is to just be us. And you know, one thing that I love about human design is that it's really grounded in experimentation. It is the experiment. And so even when we act quote unquote out of alignment, maybe could check in with ourselves and check in with our authority and think, that's not what I want to be doing. But even when, and we inevitably do all of the time, sort of step outside of the true path for us, it's just an experiment. You need those times. You have to have that contrast of doing things that aren't entirely right for you to know that. It's an experiment. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It really frees you from shame because you are just collecting more information. You're gaining more awareness about yourself, about life, about your body, about your choices. It is simply an information gathering exercise. It's an experiment. So there's not that added layer of suffering and judgment and shame about, oh my gosh, I went against myself. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that. No shoulds. You absolutely should have, because you know what? You learned a lot about yourself. You learned a lot about what's best for you, and you know a little bit better next time, but we're all going to continue to quote unquote slip up. But really in human design, there are no mistakes because you can't go wrong. You are always going to be a work in progress. You are simply finding out and adding to the awareness and adding to the knowledge and the wisdom. Okay, so I want to get into some practical exercises, some practices that you can do to establish a better communication to your subconscious, to your body, to your inner child. Again, that trifecta. When I'm talking about connecting with the inner child, just know all of these exercises are good for the subconscious in general. We have a lot of characters kicking around in there. I really like internal family systems. I hope that's what it's called, IFS. Working with archetypes. Obviously, astrology is very archetypal and has this sense that there are basic energy patterns. What we are is sort of an expression that is patterned by different archetypes, like the inner child, like the inner parent. I don't really want to go too much into that. Just know that what applies to your inner child is going to apply to any inner character, any inner archetype. Your inner magician, your inner witch, your judge, your critic, all of these folks inside. It's, I think, normal to have sort of a chorus in there, to have just different qualities and flavors to these different perspectives inside of yourself that will have different needs and can have competing values. So it's really interesting stuff to get into. And so this is exploring our subconscious. This is exploring embodiment, and it can be kind of chaotic and it can be a little difficult to suss out what's really going on. So just explore this work. One practice I really love is automatic writing. You start out with an intention and then you just free write on that topic. So for this particular video, that would be contact with the inner child, or what does the inner child feel about this? I want to write to my inner child, and sometimes it will be sort of my perspective, sometimes it will be her perspective, but I am letting the thoughts flow. Turn off the voice of that inner critic, turn off the mind that wants to analyze what's being written, and just try to get into a flow state. Don't worry about whether it's going to be ultimately useful to you or not. You are trying to make contact with your inner child, so you can pick a situation that happened to you in childhood and start to write. Maybe you're apologizing, maybe you are sharing your perspective of how wonderful they are, how they didn't deserve that. Whatever it is, try to establish a dialogue. Try to get to some of your deeper thoughts on the matter, some of their deeper thoughts on the matter. It is a wonderful way to explore your subconscious, because you will be surprised at what comes out a lot of the times. I know I am. When you start to just really get flowing, a lot of it is meh, but there will be gems in there every time I do this. So automatic writing, if you need a little bit more about what that is and how to do it, there's plenty of resources online, but that's the basics. Is set out with an intention. I want to know more about how I feel about this, what my inner child thinks about this, etc. And if you're just starting out with this inner child work, a really good prompt is, I want to make contact with my inner child, and just see where it goes from there. I wanted to bring up the work of that Taylor energy alignment method. That is a great tool for working with our subconscious and the state of our energy and what we truly feel. It's a matter of sway. So you stand in a relaxed posture. I'm giving you a down and dirty sort of idea of what this method is, but I encourage you, check her out. She's got a podcast, books, etc. But the basic method is asking a question, trying to get clarity on how you truly feel about something, whether something's healthy for you. And that she goes into the specifics of how to frame questions and everything like that. But you stand relaxed, and if your body sways forward, that's a yes. If it sways backward, it's a no. And getting comfortable and experience with that sway, it's a kind of muscle testing, if you've ever heard of muscle testing. And there are different methods to it. I like her method, and you are asking very specific questions, getting comfortable with that subconscious response. So it's a wonderful tool to put in your toolkit for all of this, and to get in contact with, again, your inner child and other parts of you that are subconscious, to see, what do I really think about this? My mind can tell me this and that, but if I'm going to decondition and come out of my thinking and my analysis, how do I feel? What's my somatic gut instinct and response? Well, EAM, Energy Alignment Method, that's Yvette's work, is a way to develop that contact and communication with your subconscious and with your gut. All right, so another thing that I love a practice for working with the subconscious is active visualization. It is pretty simple, actually. It's closing your eyes, going inside, and calling up an image. For you, it may work more on sensing or hearing. We know clairvoyance is seeing things that aren't there, I guess. Clairaudience is hearing things. These other senses, these sixth senses, have to do with being able to visualize or hear or sense or smell or taste things that aren't there. It is subconscious material. When we close our eyes and we go in our inner space, for me, I have a very vivid imagination, so it is actual visualization. It is active imagination. I'm seeing things in my mind's eye. I'm hearing things as well. Just wanted to make note that this works kind of differently for different people, but in a very basic sense, you are going within, going into your internal landscape and calling up imagery, sensations, visuals, and auditory information. In this case, it would be our inner child. Calling up an image of yourself as a child, calling and intending to make contact with your inner child, letting it sort of play out, letting that energy be there, trying to connect with it, talking to it within your mind's eye. So it's an active visualization. You call up that visual or that felt sense of this entity, and then you attempt to have some sort of dialogue with it. If it doesn't want to talk to you necessarily, you can just tell it what you want it to know, what you want it to hear. We are, when you really think of it, the perfect person to reparent ourselves, to fill in the gaps for that inner child, because we know exactly what we've been through. We know exactly what we feel we lack. We know exactly what we needed to hear back then. We have all of the information, and maybe those memories are a bit buried, but this work will start to bring some of this to the surface. And I want to make mention here, human design is based on astrology, right? And Ra talks about this too. Saturn is the ring past knot, and what we're talking about there is that there are blocks and barriers to knowing certain things and to having certain memories for a reason. So all of this stuff is only going to come up if we're ready for it. Really, that's how it happens. That's what Saturn's job is, to create a material barrier to keep things hidden and buried until we are ready to deal with it. Just wanted to make mention of that. I think that gives us a little confidence that we're not going to hopefully re-traumatize ourselves or get into some material here that we're just not ready for. I think it all happens. Our bodies, our subconscious is so wise, and there are those inner mechanisms to protect us, to keep us safe. Really just trust that. But you are wanting to dig into it a little bit. Inevitably, eventually have access to your full self and be able to process through what has happened to you in your life, what has happened to your inner child, and remember some of that stuff. So call up your inner child. Just start the relationship from there. This is just a fabulous exercise to do, and there's not much you need to get started on it. You could later today go and find a quiet space. You can actually combine active visualization with automatic writing. So do your active visualization, and then after you're done and you feel like it's a good place to thank them, tell them you love them, affirm for them that I'm here now and I'm willing to establish trust and I'm open to hearing what you need and all of that. Make a strong show of support to your inner child through that active imagination, and then afterwards you can write about it. Reflect on that experience, write down some of the takeaways, and if there's anything else that comes out, it's great to combine those two practices. Spend quality time with yourself, and you can think in terms of spoiling and indulging and making up for, maybe not out of a guilty place, but out of a place of just wanting to cherish and spoil and show attention to your inner child. You can plan days or planned activities in your day where you really make it about them. So if it is an arts or crafts project, collage is something wonderful that's really easily accessible. Think about things if you don't feel like you're an artist and you carry a lot of shame and judgment about what your inner child wanted to do. Oh, I could never learn to play an instrument. Oh, I could never make art. I'm not talented. I'm not an artist. I could never do this sport. Whatever it is that your inner child really wanted to do and maybe wasn't given the space or encouraged to develop, you can do that as an adult. Just be easy with yourself. Do not pile on more shame and judgment and criticism. That's why I love things like collage, because it is so accessible to just get to play. You really want to ground in play. You're doing this because it's fun. You're doing this because your inner child has always wanted to, and you're the adult now that can give them that experience. How cool. You have the money to go and buy some fun art supplies that they might like and really let them pick them out, right? Go shopping with your inner child and pick out some things that might be fun to do together. You don't actually have to spend money either. For example, I sat down and watched every episode of Sailor Moon Crystal because it is a new Sailor Moon series. That I loved Sailor Moon as a child. Yeah, there might be voices, adult voices, that think, oh my gosh, what a waste of time, how ridiculous. You're an adult, you can't spend your time watching silly shows like that. I loved it. I did it, no shame in my game. Me and my inner child just had a blast revisiting the past in that way together. There are a lot of affirming things you can do, thinking about how you were as a kid, what you enjoyed doing, and trying to give yourself those experiences as an adult and really see how much you can indulge and spoil that little part of yourself that's totally worth it, and especially if it's something they were ashamed of. I've taught myself to play multiple instruments as an adult, and it was freaking hard, but you know why? Mostly because I never did as a child. My parents did try. It quickly got to the point where it felt like it was just sort of a waste of money because I didn't really connect with any of my teachers. Nobody's to blame, but it's just unfortunate, and I got really shut down in my pursuit of music and pursuit of playing instruments and things like that. And so as an adult, even though it was a bear and a beast to learn how to do this and get my adult brain and wiring to really coordinate, I committed to it. Now I get to just play my instrument. My piano's right over there. It's something that as an adult, I can invest in myself in that way. The time, the money, the effort, all of it to make that dream come true for my inner child. You know, you don't have to go to that extent, but these are the kinds of things. Pursue those passions. That is who you truly are. What you loved as a child is what you still love today. I know that's certainly the case for me, and so indulge in it. Carve out a little bit of time for yourself to pursue those things, and just without judgment, let yourself be a beginner. You are starting from when you were a child and that thing was shut down in you, and we've only grown older and a little bit more cumbersome in our beings since then. So be very gentle with yourself, but it is just so amazing to give yourself the opportunity as an adult and to just love what you create and just do it for the sake of doing it. It's not about the product. That is just such a capitalist scam. That is such a crappy bit of programming that tells us we have to do things for a purpose. It has to be good, and so much perfectionistic shame wraps around us that it's just not fun anymore. Try to get to a place where you can just laugh at yourself, have fun with it, do it because it's silly, and your inner child is going to love it. Once you develop a strong connection with your inner child, don't be surprised if their voice is now something that you have access to in your life. And it's important to listen to your inner child. It's not going to be possible in every situation to fully honor what they're wanting, but we need to be respectful of our inner child, and we do need to listen and at least acknowledge their feelings and their needs in the moment. So I had a few conversations with a friend. We're both very analytical people. We like to get to the bottom of things together. And in our conversation, it came out that this person's inner child did not trust or like their partner very much. Oh, that's so complicated. It felt like an impasse at first, but they dug a little deeper, and it really was pretty simple. Their partner is very serious, and around certain subjects, humor was not allowed, and so that really funny, precocious inner child of theirs felt unseen and, quite frankly, a little bit unsafe around their partner when it came to particular subjects, because their partner was exhibiting an intolerance for the discharging of a little bit of tension that the inner child was trying to enact by bringing humor into the situation, trying to make it a little bit more lighthearted. All it really boiled down to was informing their partner. I'm a manifestor, I love informing. It was this negotiation between the inner child's needs, the partner, and this person. But what was happening before all of this realization and this informing and things getting so much better was that, and this is what we all do, and this is why I bring this up, in the moment, we are wanting to maintain connection with the other person. We so often, because we have these different voices inside ourselves that do have different needs and different feelings, we are just torn apart, and we have to almost sever ourselves, from that deep wisdom to stay in connection with somebody else. This is really how self-abandonment works. I have certainly had this play out in my relationships in so many situations where my inner child, for whatever reason, doesn't like this person, this, and that. And I can't just shut her down and shut her up. It may not necessarily affect my behavior with this person, you know, if it's a client of mine or whatever, but I want to know how she feels. And I want her to know that I care, that in private, we can feel however we want about this person. I am aware of it, so I will have my eyes open, right? She's wanting to communicate with me for a reason always and has legitimate feelings. This is some territory to really think about, especially as you strengthen that connection with your inner child. You will be able to hear them more, and that might cause some conflict or some inner dissonance with you. It is okay. You don't have to do it in real time when you're in the vicinity of the other person, but try to make time to whatever you need to do to hash those feelings out and be that adult and that problem solver for your inner child, and don't just ignore it and hope that it's going to get better. Again, guilt motivation. I'm here with the voice to tell you that you have what you need to really work through these things, but burying it is not the way. So this inner child work really puts us in confrontation with our needs, if they're being met, if they have been met in this life or not, right? This might sound rudimentary, but it's something that I did, is actually Googled a list of basic needs, because I've been so severed from that. We are so conditioned, especially again in this culture. A good kid puts down their own needs, lays those to rest, smothers their own needs for the sake of others, to be polite, to be socially responsible, this, and that. We're focused on what other people need. How can I help you? How can I be of service? There's nothing wrong with being of service. I'm a body worker. I live to serve. I live to please. But being a people pleaser at the expense of our own needs is just really detrimental. It's not self completely. So I looked up a list of needs. It seems kind of silly, but it was what I needed to do. I was that severed from myself, and really knowing needs, what's that? What even, I need some examples here, because I just am so out of touch with that, right? I look at them, see what I resonate with, do some automatic writing about what my needs are and how I might be able to meet them, because really deconditioning in human design, it brings us to the center of ourselves. It puts us at the center. It puts our true authority where it should be. We are seated in ourselves, and we become our own source in so many ways. So you can do some automatic writing about the ideal qualities of a parent, or even a Godhead, a source for you, a higher power. You can do automatic writing about what those qualities are. What would that entity do, give, show, demonstrate? What would you feel around them? And then think about how to cultivate those qualities in yourself, access to that in your life, active visualization where you give yourself those things, and see how you can start to meet your own needs. Because again, we want to be the center of ourselves. We want to be our own source. We want to be whole and complete within ourselves and act out of that knowing that right that we are whole and complete unto ourselves. We have everything we need. We know what we need to know. We can do what we need to do in this life. And it's not to say that we won't have relationships and it's wrong to meet our needs through other people. Absolutely not. But that is just extra. When we are our own source and we do find ways to meet our own needs, we're not dependent on one certain thing, one entity out there, whether it's a human who is fallible, imperfect, and quite frankly mortal. We cannot have our sense of self and our worth and all of our needs connected to one person or one thing or just a small handful of that, because that relationship goes away. If that partner unfortunately passes away, whatever happens that can change that stable source for us, then what are we going to do? So it's about cultivating that responsibility for meeting our own needs in a sense, and not to say that we don't need others. Obviously, every human being needs connection and we need people we can trust, and all of that is just absolutely fine, but it is putting ourselves at the center. And I kind of talked about last time, if regardless of people on the outside meeting our needs, if we don't care about our own needs, we're not even going to be able to receive that from somebody else, if that makes sense. So we need to respect and love ourselves and care about our own needs and have the desire to fulfill them and to be able to receive that from whatever source. And it starts with us really making that commitment. I feel like I covered this in the last video, so I don't want to go over old territory again, but strengthening that connection with your inner child so strengthens the voice of your inner authority. They're so intimately connected, and obviously all of this plays out through the body. So I really see this trifecta between inner child, subconscious, and the body, and that is the key to our inner authority. That's the key to deconditioning. It's really this deep, true sense that you're coming to with the deconditioning process of, I have everything I need. The wisdom's right here. I don't need to go read esoteric wisdom or these teachings, which, hey, I love it. I'm quad right receptive. I love to just soak in all of the information into my subconscious and see what turns out. But ultimately, my inner wisdom, my inner knowing is going to be the ultimate authority. I don't need anything else. I'm whole and complete unto myself. And so this is a reclamation project. It really reminds me of, I know a couple of really powerful women who are into birth work, into home births, and that amazing on the life nerve territory of trusting ourselves so intensely and so completely that we can free birth, which just means that we go with ourselves and our own authority and our innate wisdom of our wombs and our bodies first. That's our first authority. And then we can go to the outer authorities given different situations that might arise. But I love that that work grounds us in our own beings first and flies in the face of this cultural programming that disconnects us from our own power and says we have to go to these intervening forces first instead of going first to the temple of our own wisdom, which is our bodies. I hope that's been helpful, an exploration of ways to build a stronger bridge between ourselves and our subconscious, and our inner children is really the ticket. It's the core. That it has to do with loving ourselves and loving our body. Take care of yourselves. Please get at me in the comments if there's any questions or topics that you'd love to see me cover in a future video. And for now, have a wonderful deconditioning process. I wish you all the love and strength on your journey. Bye for now.